Hi guys, Lorea here, vlogging to you from the north of Spain, San Sebastian. And this is part 2 of my 15-part video series on racism in Spain and how I've experienced it since I've been living here for 5 years. So in part 1 I talked about racism in Ibiza, the island, and we're going back to Ibiza for part 2. So this is the second incident that happened to me when I was there. So basically in 2015, I wanted to invest in Ibiza because being part Spanish myself, I'd been there about 11 times before, and this was the 12th trip that I'd made to the island. And the intention was to invest in the island. So in 2015, I made 4 separate trips. And as I mentioned in my previous video, every trip I encountered some racism, which I'd never experienced before. But I think Spanish just began to resent more and more foreigners coming onto their island. And I was on the receiving end of it. And these incidences actually made me decide not to invest in Ibiza and the Balearic Islands. So on this particular trip, what happened was that I was going down a one-way road through a village in the middle of the island, and I'd been down this road so many times before. I always love to get lost on the island, and I really go off-road, you know, and kind of sleep in the mountains when I'm on that island. And this time I came across, from the opposite direction, 2 cars. There were about 8 guys between the 2 cars, and I stopped in the road because I assumed that they would know that they had just passed a section of the road where they could turn into it and allow me to pass, as I was going down the right way of the one-way road and they were in the wrong. Well, they didn't let me pass, and they just sat there, and I stopped my car, turned the engine off and locked the doors because I felt like a confrontation was about to happen. And obviously, me being a single girl with 8 guys there, there was no telling what could happen in that situation. Well, they started honking at me, actually, really loudly, the 2 cars. It was almost like very strange for me because I've been to the north of Italy, and Italians are really polite drivers actually in the north. They don't really honk at you. So at the time I didn't know they were Italian, not yet, but it was only afterwards, upon reflection, that I was so shocked that they did that. And I think there's something about people when they go traveling together, and especially when they're in a group of their own people outside of the country where they're from, they have this almost brazen attitude that borderlines rudeness, you know, a disrespect for the culture that they're traveling to, and a disrespect for the people that they meet day to day. And if they traveled alone, or, you know, in smaller groups, they would probably not be as rude as they were to me. And certainly, if this incident had happened in Italy, they wouldn't have been rude at all. Okay, so after honking at me, I decided I didn't like that, and I just sat there, and they got out of their cars and came up to me and told me to back up for them. And I told them, no, this is a one-way road, you're going in the wrong direction, it would be okay if you could just back up and let me go. And they said no, they were going in the right direction and that I needed to back up. And I explained to them, look, there's a part in the road where you've just come from where I can pass, and they weren't having any of it. And then I said, look, I've been to this island many times before, and I know that this is a one-way road and I'm going down the right way. And then they said, you should go back to Asia because it's clear you've never been to this island before. You don't know anything about it. And you're in the wrong, they said, and we're Italian and we own half of this island, so you should get off of our island. Well, my expression was not amused, And I just looked at them and said, actually, I am part Spanish. I know this island very well, and I know that you are in the wrong. So I just sat there and I said, I'm not going to move, so what are you going to do about it? Eventually, they were cussing and swearing at me, saying that I was a puta, which is like a whore, a bitch, you know, a woman that doesn't deserve any respect. They got back in their cars and they backed up. And whilst they were backing up, they stuck their middle finger out at me. And then I was allowed to pass. But it was really interesting because after that particular incident, I realized that actually Ibiza is almost half owned by Italians and Dutch, and there's a lot of immigrants in Ibiza, and that would probably explain why there's so much resentment of Spanish people against them, because these foreigners come into Spain and buy up property that Spanish people otherwise cannot afford and push prices up as well of property, and it makes Spanish people really, really resent, you know, foreigners. And that could be one of the reasons why I have personally experienced so much racism in this country too, especially since I also wanted to invest in it. But why I want to invest is because I am part Spanish, you know. A lot of these foreigners that invest here, they're not Spanish. And many Spanish people can't even afford to buy their own housing. So this would definitely explain some of the racism that I felt whilst being in Ibiza, you know. And obviously having been there for, at that point, 12 times in my life, because I started going when I was very young at university in the UK. It was kind of something that you did as a rite of passage as a UK university student, you know, go to Ibiza with your friends and party. But my love of the island really developed as time went by, and it became a much more spiritual experience. And after attempting to go back with many different people, I finally started going there a lot alone and spending a lot of time alone, you know, experiencing the beauty of the island, which is really the best way to do it, you know, either alone or in a couple. That's truly how I believe it should be experienced. But it would really explain, you know, some of this racism in Spain and why Spanish people are just so angry at foreigners for taking away their island of Ibiza, for taking away some of the investment opportunities that they themselves could use. And in case you didn't know it, Ibiza is also very short staffed for long-term housing. You know, the whole island and all the owners of property on the island just want tourism dollars, so they focus a lot on renting short-term to holiday makers, and there's actually a lack of housing long-term for people that really need it, you know, like school teachers, doctors, nurses that work on the island. All the professionals have a really hard time finding accommodation. So this is something that the Spanish government really needs to work out. So please follow my YouTube and Instagram channels, and I'll be posting my third video of racism in Spain very soon.